KETV Newswatch 7, chronicling the stories impacting our community. Stories making a difference. Stories that matter to you. This is KETV Newswatch 7's Chronicle.
Assessing whether we want to stay in Nebraska and fight the good fight, or if we want to take our family over to Iowa and reap those benefits there.
Same-sex marriage stopped in Nebraska, at least for now. U.S. Supreme Court could have a decision on all gay marriages by late June. Good morning. I'm Rob McCartney. Welcome to KETV Newswatch 7's Chronicle. Now, these past few days have all been about love, celebrating those you care about for Valentine's Day. But for 2,300 same-sex couples in Nebraska, they don't have state wedding anniversaries to celebrate. It's because Nebraska is one of 14 states that does not allow same-sex marriage. 37 others and the District of Columbia have legalized gay marriage, including Iowa. It is a topic that leaves very little middle ground for those on both sides of the issue. And right now, there are 3 bills in the Nebraska legislature dealing with gay rights. KETV Newswatch 7's Andrew Ozaki reports from Lincoln.
They circled the rotunda, calling for the words of equality carved in the walls of the state capitol to apply to gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender citizens.
Fundamental fairness not only dictates it, but equality under the law demands it.
Senator Adam Moorfeld of Lincoln introduced LB 586. It would prohibit discrimination in the workplace based on sexual orientation. Similar to Omaha's 2012 Equal Employment Ordinance, businesses like ConAgra believe it makes for a more inviting, more productive workplace.
It's the right thing to do, and it also makes good business sense.
Omaha Senator Sarah Howard's LB 648 would allow unmarried couples to both adopt a child, something this Lincoln couple, together for 25 years, say would give financial and emotional security to their son.
It's not fair to him, and it makes our family second-class citizens.
And LB 647 by Senator Jeremy Nordquist from Omaha would stop the Department of Health and Human Services from barring homosexuals from being foster parents.
And we need to make sure that all available placements that can protect and support these vulnerable children should be welcomed and affirmed in our state, not set to the side.
One of the people applauding the proposals the most, Omaha City Council member Ben Gray.
What I'm hoping that they will do here is catch up with Omaha and do the right thing and recognize that if for no other reason, economically, it's the best thing for us to do as a state.
Let's go do this!
In Lincoln, Andrew Ozaki, KETV Newswatch 7.
Now, all 3 proposals have been introduced in the legislature before. The ideas all have failed. And here with us this morning to talk about gay rights, State Senator Adam Moorfeld of Lincoln and Martin Cannon, attorney and board member of the Thomas More Society of Omaha. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Moorfeld, I'll start with you. You said in that report, fundamental fairness not only dictates it, but equality under the law demands it. And you're talking workplace discrimination in your legislation. Do you see that ideal spreading to all LGBT rights arguments?
Absolutely. I think that we have an equal protection clause in the United States, and that means that there's equality under the law for all Nebraskans and all Americans. And so what my bill does is ensure that they are treated equally in the workplace.
Are you finding support for that or any opposition?
Well, there's support and opposition. This is an evolving issue. However, we've received enough support in the Judiciary Committee for the last 2 years now to get it out of the Judiciary Committee and then to have a robust debate on the floor about it.
What is your biggest battle you're fighting?
Well, I think our biggest battle that we're fighting is educating people on the issues. Educating people that these are regular, hardworking Nebraskans that were born the way that they were born and then want to be treated with equality and dignity and respect.
Okay, and why then should gay marriage be approved in Nebraska? Let me ask you that.
Well, my bill has nothing to do with gay marriage,
Absolutely.
but I do believe that gay marriage will be approved in Nebraska, whether on the federal level or in the district court and then appeals court level here in the state. I believe that it's about, again, fundamental fairness. The right to marry is a constitutional right, and that constitutional right should be provided to everyone on an equal basis.
Martin, let me ask you, you're an attorney and a Thomas More Society Omaha board member we mentioned. You filed a brief in the Nichols versus Nichols case.
I did.
Where the issue was whether a same-sex couple married in Iowa could be divorced in Nebraska.
Right.
Court basically, to make it easy, basically said it didn't have jurisdiction.
For the moment.
For the moment, yeah. Your side won. Why were you opposed to that?
We're opposed to it because the constitutional amendment in Nebraska says that Nebraska does not recognize anything but a traditional marriage. The the request for divorce in Nebraska of people married outside of Nebraska would have required the court to recognize the marriage in order to grant the divorce. Now that seems sometimes a little silly, but really what it is, the subject of that petition for divorce is the marriage itself. It's not like they're asking to dissolve a business partnership or anything like that. They are asking for relief and rulings that would flow only from the fact that they had been married, so that the court couldn't act without recognizing the marriage, and the amendment prevents that from happening.
So basically, it's more of, it's not on the issue of, in this case, it wasn't necessarily on the issue of say, 2 men, 2 women being married. Right. It was more on the legalese aspect.
It's a jurisdictional issue. The court basically ruled that she did not have jurisdiction because of the amendment.
You see that changing?
No.
Not at all?
No.
Okay. You know, you're opposed to same-sex marriage in general. As I said earlier, a majority of states recognize them. Is that inevitable for Nebraska?
No, I don't believe so. A lot of people treat it as though it's inevitable because of the Windsor ruling that came down recently out of the U.S. Supreme Court. But that ruling was very limited and is actually saturated with references to the fact that this is a state issue. Marriage is the prerogative of the states. And that ruling threw out one part of the federal Defense of Marriage Act, but left intact the one that essentially recognizes the states' rights in the marriage question. So I don't see the fact that the Supremes are going to rule on this probably sometime this summer. I don't think it's a done deal at all.
Yeah, you mentioned the states aspect. I mean, we have Alabama's going on right now. They've got a, so you call it, lack of a better term, an in-state battle going on, where you have a district court judge saying, hey, you've got to give these licenses to same-sex couples, and then you have a state-level judges saying, nope, I'm not going to hand them out. You have an and now they're debating whether or not they should do that. You see that happening for Nebraska?
Well, it certainly could, although Nebraska, I think, voted very strongly in favor of the amendment years ago as far as the populace goes, and I don't think that has changed. Gay marriage is obviously talked a lot about all over the country, but I think Nebraska is a very strong, conservative, traditional state, and I think that I think it'll hold its ground.
Senator Moorfield, I assume you have an opposing viewpoint on whether the inevitability of the law coming to Nebraska.
Absolutely. I think that gay marriage is inevitable, and I think it's inevitable because of changing attitudes, not only in our society and in our state, but also in our court system. We are seeing United States federal appeals courts across the country saying that this is a question of equal rights, of equal protection, and that marriage is a fundamental constitutional right, and that right should be equally applied to everyone, regardless of sex. And I think that what we are seeing in Nebraska is what we're seeing across the country, which is a strong changing attitude in how we view same-sex marriage. And the fact that this is about people who are born a certain way and they should be treated equally and fairly, like everybody else.
And another issue out there, we were mentioning homosexuals as foster parents, not necessarily married, just individuals. This is Senator Norquist's bill, but you signed on to it.
Yes, I did.
Why?
I signed on to it because I believe that it doesn't matter if you're LGBT or if you're straight or if you're single or if you're a couple, that it should be about what is in the best interest of the child. And there are families that are single parents, couples, heterosexual, homosexual, you name it, that are loving families. And you can't simply just look at a whole class of people and automatically say that these folks are not going to be good parents. You have to go by a case-by-case evaluation of the parents or parent based on who they are and based on the best interests of the child. That's how we do it with heterosexual couples. LGBT couples should be treated the same way.
Does it matter married, unmarried?
No, I don't think it matters at all. My mother raised me as a single mother for about the first 15 years of my life. And I think that by most standards, I've grown up well, I've had a well-rounded upbringing, and I've done well. And I think that fit parents come in all shapes and sizes, single, couples, heterosexual, homosexual, you name it. The fact of the matter is that we should be looking at the best interests of the child, and we should be looking at whether or not those parents are fit in a case-by-case basis.
Mr. Cannon, your viewpoint?
My viewpoint is that it really comes down to some very fundamental things. The best interest of the child standard that the bills in question would essentially enact has been problematic it's been widely used in the juvenile court and in domestic cases for years and years and years without ever having been defined. So best interest of the child is whatever some judge thinks it is, and that judge might differ from that judge. There is no definition of the thing, and it has allowed, I think, a lot of out-of-control rulings and untenable arrangements that are manifestly not in the best interest of children. Going to the marriage thing, it is our position that men and women are not just different physically, they are different in their natures. They somewhat oppose one another. In a marriage, each moderates the other and each complements the other. A man and a woman together in marriage make a whole, and that whole unit is important, even absent children, but especially to children. Thousands of years of human history have borne that out. It is simply nature's design. So people can talk about having gay marriage, but that's like saying a circle is a square. It doesn't make it true. The creation of the illusion, however, in our position, badly damages real marriage. It does so by misrepresenting marriage. It suggests that what's missing in a same-sex marriage wasn't really important anyway. It suggests that a child doesn't need a father and a mother, and that if she does, that's too bad because marriage isn't about her. It suggests that we can take the woman out of a marriage, replace her with a man, and nothing is lost. There are so many ways, I could list another 10 or 20 of them, that it twists the idea of marriage and undermines what has been the most reliable, stable building block of civil society for millennia.
Well, let me ask you this. Are there any gay rights bills that you can agree with?
Not that I'm aware of. They all have the same fundamental flaws. If it's just a matter of saying, look, if a gay guy comes into your restaurant and wants a bowl of soup, you got to give it to him, I don't think we'd be having this discussion. Of course, we wouldn't need that because that kind of discrimination doesn't happen in any significant way. What the effort at gay rights establishment does is essentially insists, because you have to remember that homosexuality comes with conduct attached. And the insistence on gay rights is an insistence that the conduct be accepted, even though for centuries it's been viewed as immoral. The issue is going to come down to one of freedom of conscience. If gay right is recognized as, or gay marriage is recognized as a right, forced participation is next. If I'm a cake maker, I got to make you the cake. It says, congratulations, Tony and Joe. That's essentially forced expression of approval, and or it's penalized expression of disapproval. The First Amendment gives us a right to freedom of religion and freedom of expression that allows us to opt out of participating in these things, and yet forced participation is ultimately the result of what we're seeing here attempted.
But this isn't about forced participation. What this is about is treating people equally and fairly. Now, this is not also about freedom of conscience. This is about making sure that folks can work in a place where they are not discriminated against based on how they were born. Now, my colleague here would like to say that you know, this is a slippery slope. But the fact of the matter is this is about providing fundamental equal rights to people, Americans, Nebraskans, brothers and sisters, and it's about making it so that people can love who they want to love, and making it so that people are not discriminated based on how they were born. And we don't go and tell people that, hey, you know what, you're black or you're a woman, and based on my conscience, I can treat you differently or fire you because of that. Those are the same arguments that were made in Loving versus Virginia when somebody was not allowed, a white woman was not allowed to marry a black man. Those arguments were found to be, number one, unconstitutional, and they're the same type of arguments that are being made today, just in a different context.
Well, let me ask you both a final question then. What impact would the legislation that's before the legislature right now have on future generations?
Well, I think, you know, first, making sure that we create an environment that is inclusive and that people are not discriminated against based on how they're born will ensure that in Nebraska, we are a state that is welcoming, that can bring in talent from across the country and across the world. It's about making sure that we tell not only Nebraskans, but also people across the country that Nebraska is inclusive, open, and willing to to take you in and respect you with the dignity that every human should expect.
All right. Mr. Cannon?
I think the best way to answer that question has to be by pointing out a simple thing that probably nobody would argue, and that is that we have major societal problems that result directly from the high percentage of single-parent families in our society. No question that it fosters poverty and all kinds of instabilities and crime. And there's no question.
Or it fosters somebody like me.
I understand your position.
My mother
on that.
was a single mother
right.
for 15
and
years.
She struggled. And she struggled. She had to struggle.
She did not struggle.
She didn't benefit from the presence of a man in the house.
Are you saying I did not benefit from the presence of a man in the house? Because I am the product of a single mother.
Sir, a person can rise above difficult circumstances. That doesn't mean we should embrace difficult circumstances.
Understood.
The problem with the gay marriage thing is that it would suggest that even though single-parent households have problems, we can solve them by having two gay people and it's not a single-parent household anymore. The problem with that is that the solution doesn't lie in having two parents. The solution lies in having both, a man and a woman as a parent.
Okay. Gentlemen, thanks very much for the discussion.
Thank
we
you.
could talk about this all day.
Absolutely.
And we will continue to talk about it. Still plenty more ahead, including the fight to be married in Nebraska, same-sex couples sharing their story and their struggles. They're dealing with a terminal diagnosis and several kids, making for a lot of uncertainty. You're watching KETV News Watch 7's Chronicle.
I believe marriage is a man and a woman, between a man and a woman, and more importantly, so do those folks in Nebraska.
And that leaves little question as to where Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts stands on gay marriage. Still, area couples hope they will have the same rights in their same-sex relationships. You're watching KETV News Watch 7's Chronicle. Here with us now to continue our discussion on same-sex marriages are Sally and Susan Waters and Susan Koenig, who is an area lawyer, also dealing in this issue. And I want to start, Sally, tell us your story. I mean, you've been together almost 20 years now.
Yes, we've been together 17 years. We first had a union ceremony 17 years ago here in Nebraska at our church. We adopted our first child internationally, and in 2002 moved to California so we could have a second parent adoption for her. While we were in California, in 2008, we adopted again, and we were legally married in that window of opportunity when it was legal in California. We moved back here in 2010 for family reasons. Everybody's here, and aging parents and so on. We have a third child who's joined us, and just after she joined us, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, and then last summer was diagnosed stage 4. So it's metastasized, and you know, we're dealing with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, dealing with that, you're also one of 7 couples suing Nebraska to overturn the ban on same-sex marriage. Does your diagnosis add any urgency to that?
A great deal. Yeah, obviously the diagnosis means, oh, we need to get our affairs in order. Our youngest is 10 years old. We have many things that we need to take care of. And we discovered the terrible financial burden that the family will be left in when I do go. And we're hoping it's going to be a long time from now. Sure. At the same time, we have to plan for the worst. And that's the worst, is that they would be left with a great, great burden.
And Susan, how's the battle going for you?
It's a struggle from day to day. I think any family that has gone through this knows what that means. You have good days, you have bad days. We have great kids. I lost my mother when I was young, so it breaks my heart that my kids might have to go through that. But you know, we're hopeful. Technology and medicine is advancing so rapidly. We're just praying for good outcomes.
But I mean, dealing with a cancer diagnosis is one thing, but then also trying to rewrite Nebraska law is kind of adds a little bit, more
Actually,
to your plate.
No, I don't think so. I think in a sense
Really?
it gives you clarity when you know that there may be a limit to the time you have. You want to make sure that you use that time well. And Sally and I are really clear, and we have always been clear, when we left Nebraska is because we couldn't have a second parent adoption. I was the only one that was legally my daughter's mother at the time. And we just said, no, this won't work for us. We moved out to California so that we would both equally be parents. So coming back here because of family, we also knew times were changing, and we don't have a problem with standing up and saying, we don't agree. This is wrong. It's not fair. It's not Nebraska to be like this. We both grew up here. This is our home.
Do you see yourself ahead of the curve, though?
Well, I don't.
That other states are doing it, and Nebraska hasn't done it yet, and now you may just be out there where you could live in one of these other states?
Oh, well, and we did, and I loved being out in California. You know, the nice thing about being in California, it's such a much more welcoming atmosphere. People were very, you know, oh, so what? they just didn't care. But, you know, we're finding people here really, I know that the gentleman that spoke earlier says, you know, we voted, well, that was 10 years ago, and we're finding our neighbors are very welcoming to us. We get together and play Uno, and, you know, we do family things with our neighbors, and they don't care.
The school, yeah, it's
a different environment now.
It's different than it was when we left.
Okay. Susan Koenig, I want to ask you, where do things stand with the federal lawsuit?
Well, next week we'll be having a hearing for our motion for preliminary injunction, asking for Judge Battalion to rule on our case right now because of the urgency for our clients, particularly for Susan and Sally. So we will be eager for Judge Battalion's ruling on that, and see if we might be joining the ranks of the other 37 plus D.C.
Well, 12 years ago, Judge Battalion ruled to overturn the ban on gay marriage. Does that give you, but then he was subsequently overturned. Does that give you any hope?
Well, what gives us hope is what the United States Supreme Court said in the Windsor case in 2013 when they struck down a portion of the federal so-called Defense of Marriage Act. And in that case, the Supreme Court said, we need to end this stigmatization that the denial of freedom to marriage causes. We can no longer say that relationships like Susan and Sally's and Nick and Jason's and all of the other parties to this lawsuit, we can't say that their relationships are unworthy of recognition.
So what kind of hope then do you give other same-sex couples out there?
They should be very encouraged. We believe that the law that the United States Supreme Court set forth in Windsor absolutely applies now that we're looking at on the state at the state level, and that's why we're seeing these bans fall all across the country, and that should give them great hope.
And then finally, Susan and Sally, I want to ask you, what do you want people to know? What's the takeaway?
I think that they're missing an opportunity to just allow people to be who they are. And to share in the lives of families that may look a little different. We're still good neighbors, we're still good citizens of Nebraska, and that's all we want, just to do our part and be allowed to have equality.
Okay. Sally?
Yeah, and I think the message that you and I talked about the other day about our kids understanding, all kids understanding, if there are things that are happening in our society, we have an obligation to step up, even if it's not convenient for us, and to say something about it and do something, try to make a difference.
Great point. All right. Sally, Susan, and Susan, thanks very much.
Thanks for having us.
And we'll be right back. Well, this morning we've discussed same-sex marriage and gay rights in Nebraska. Legislation being considered right now. Impact on hundreds of couples who live here and why some are fighting to uphold the ban on same-sex marriage. We've linked to groups and organizations on both sides of the issue to help keep you informed. Just go to KETV.com. I'm Rob McCartney. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here next Sunday at 10.